When Fallout New Vegas was released on October 2010, it was developed by Obsidian Entertainment. During the development of New Vegas, game director Joshua Sawyer created a mini-game called Caravan. This video is going to be part of a small series in which I recreate Caravan in Unreal Engine 5. If you haven't checked out my Caravan shorts on the channel yet, they offer a sneak peek into the development process. I'm also on Twitter, or X as it's known, where I regularly post updates on game development. Make sure to follow. In New Vegas, certain NPCs let you play Caravan against them. One of them is Ringo, initially hiding in the gas station from the Powder Gangers. If you complete his quest, he moves to the Crimson Caravan camp.
Hey there, friend.
Others include Criff Briscoe at the diner shop in Novak and Lacey at the Mojave Outpost. Recreating Caravan begins with setting up a blank Unreal project. When it comes to game engines and development, the scene today is much more accessible and offers a wider range of engine choices than it did back in the early 2010s. While the main rivalry has always been between Unreal and Unity, engines like Godot and GameMaker have gained serious traction. Ultimately, it comes down to personal preference and what you need from an engine. For me, Unreal has been my go-to for many years, and I'm deeply familiar with it and plan to stick to it. With the blank project set up, I quickly modeled two of the core assets I'd need early on, the board and the card. There's nothing particularly special about how it was modeled. Since we're dealing with playing cards, this is where textures come into play. I found a playing card pack online that had exactly what I needed, so I simply used one of the images in the pack as a texture for the card asset. I aligned the UV corners as best as I could, and naturally if one of these playing card textures aligns, the rest of the cards will be as well. For the board I grabbed a 4K texture from Polyhaven. It's just a placeholder for now. I'll likely revisit it and update it later in development. In the discussion of aesthetics, the massive hit Balatro has set the bar for flash animations. I'll admit I don't have experience in that area, so for this prototype I'm keeping it simple with a basic low poly 3D card. If you do know how to make any fancy animations in Unreal Engine, do let me know in the comments. I imported the models along with their textures into Unreal. For the board I simply hooked up the relevant textures, nothing too complex. Later on I might revisit this and create a modular setup that allows me to change the board based on its location, but for now this setup works completely fine. The challenging part is actually setting up the cards. The pack I downloaded contains 67 PNG files. A standard playing card contains 52 cards. That includes 4 suits, hearts, diamonds, clubs and spades. You have value cards, aces, kings, jacks, queens and jokers. The reason why it has 67 PNG files, it also includes back-facing cards, which are particularly useful in multiplayer or versus CPU setups where you shouldn't be able to see the cards the opponents are holding. Creating a separate material for each texture will leave me around with 67 materials, which is inefficient and time consuming. Instead, I create a master material. By using a texture sample and converting it into a parameter, I can swap out the textures externally through the material instance, making the process much more streamlined. The core functionality comes from the card blueprint setup. I created a data structure to hold each card's value, and to support this data structure, these are the enumerators I created, and then I painstakingly created 52 cards in the data table and made sure that each entry had the correct information. I then created a blueprint called Play Caravan to serve as the main area where the game would take place. I utilized several scene components to define the locations where the cards would be positioned. While it may not be the most optimized setup, it functions well based on my current understanding of Unreal. I replicated the general layout from how it appears in Fallout New Vegas. An arrow component helps indicate the player's orientation. If it's pointing upwards, the layout is correctly aligned. I also included a simple editable text components to reflect the game's interface. Before I dive into how I set up the blueprint and its logic, it's important to point out that many people don't understand how to play Caravan.
There's even an in-game card game called Caravan, and there were some guys trying to explain how to use it. Even after 14 years, nobody knows how to play that game. Not even the hardcore fans.
Many people struggle with understanding Caravan because Fallout New Vegas doesn't provide clear or thorough instructions on how to play it. The game has a unique set of rules and mechanics that are not immediately intuitive and offers minimal guidance on how to actually play it. Caravan is very similar to Blackjack. In Blackjack, the goal is to have a hand of cards that total as close to 21 as possible without going over. Instead of aiming for 21 or as close to 21, in Caravan, players aim between 21 or 26. There are 3 columns which represents 3 separate caravans, hence the title of the game. The goal is to build each column's value between 21 and 26 whilst making your opponent's columns go under or over. Your opponent's total is above and your total is below. Face cards in Caravan work differently than in Blackjack. In Blackjack, Jack, Queens and Kings are worth 10, but in Caravan they have unique effects. A Jack removes a card from your or your opponent's stack, while a King doubles a card's value. You can also use the kings on your opponent's stack to push their caravan over the limit. In this instance, you can see the AI uses a king card on this card and pushes me over the limit. The king card only works on the card it is placed on top of, not for each individual card in the column. And here's an example of the AI using the jack card to remove my 10. To explain the queen card, let's start with the game's opening. Both players must place numbered cards to begin their caravans. I usually start with the highest value card in my hand. In this example, my first caravan has a 10, followed by an 8 and then a 9. The goal is to reach a total between 21 and 26. After this initial phase of the game, this is the part where people get confused. The second card you place in a pile determines whether the pile follows an ascending order or a descending order. Since I placed a 9 on my first caravan pile, it is now in a descending order. For example, if I place a 9, I could technically place a 10 on top, but that will lock me into an ascending order with no higher cards to continue to stack. I could stack lower value cards to start a descending order. For example, my hand has one valid card for this pile, a 3. I can't place an 8 because the pile follows a descending order from 9 to 7 to 6. Since 8 is greater than 6, it's not allowed. This is where the queen card comes in. They let you change a pile's numerical sequence. Since this pile is in a descending order, playing a queen allows me to place the 8. There is another exception to this rule, and that is you can stack cards with the same suit. Even if it breaks the ascending or descending order, you can still place it. For example, in a descending pile, a same suit card can be played regardless of its value. 7 becomes the highest number, but the sequence still remains in a descending order. To better illustrate how face cards like jacks and kings can be used, notice my pile's total value is now 30. My caravan has become over encumbered and I have a few options to fix it. I can use the jack to remove a card that can lower my total value closer or in between the ranges of 21 and 26. If you don't have a jack, you can discard a card from your hand and hope to draw a new one. If luck isn't on your side, you might have to remove the caravan pile entirely and start over. After the game's initial phase, where you build your caravan piles with value cards, the second phase begins. By now you might notice that caravan is essentially blackjack with strategy. You'll need to use face cards wisely to secure a winning position or disrupt your opponents as they get closer to victory. And to win in Caravan, you need 3 piles between 21 and 26, or 2 piles if your opponent has only 1. This means that you can accidentally lose if you reduce your Caravan just to 1. Okay, returning to the development aspect of this video, the blueprint that manages the board serves as the primary space where the game is played. I need to ensure that the character controller is set up with input mappings that match those from Fallout New Vegas. This includes the ability to cycle through your hand, place cards, remove individual cards, and clear the entire stack. Since the card already has a material instance applied, that's why you're seeing 8 instances of the 3 of clubs. Now moving on to the blueprint logic, on event begin play, there's a few functions that I need to execute immediately. First, I need to store all the cards positioned for the player's hand in an array. Then I need to randomize the deck so the player can draw any cards from the full set of 52 to find it in the data table. The side stack also needs to appear face down, so a small function handles that setup. Any cards drawn from the stack are randomized and stored in a separate array I named side stack deck. To enable communication with the board, I created a series of functions that act as in-game actions. For the sake of the video, I'll walk through how I implemented swiping left and swiping right functions. When the player swipes left or right, a card shuffling sound effect plays to simulate the feel of handling cards in real life. I use a variable called current index to track the player's position within the hand, updating it as they swipe. Swiping left increments the index by 1, allowing the system to cycle through the card array that I set up in event begin play that stores the card's position. To visually highlight the selected card, I simply added an offset of +2 in its z-axis, making it pop out and clearly indicate to the player that that card has been selected. In the next Caravan devlog, I'll be showcasing further progress on the game's development, including new functions and systems that are currently being planned and implemented. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate your feedback in the comments. If you have any crazy ideas or features you'd love to see in the game, I'd be more than happy to hear them, maybe even a better tutorial than New Vegas's.